Greetings, everybody. Thanks for tuning back in here to another episode here on the Speedbug channel. Today we got an episode about my beloved 959, Ducati 959 here behind me. And I don't make a lot of content with this bike, except when I'm whooping on it and beating the shit out of it racing the other 959. But the topic of today's video is the 959 worth the money? Is it worth the buy? It's on the expensive side from the other bikes, meaning such as like the ZX-10R, the CBR, the Gigster, and of course you cannot forget the R1. Not the M or like the S1000 or anything like that, because those bikes and the fully loaded Beamers and stuff, they are significantly more money, as well with like the V4 and stuff like that. This is Ducati's entry-level crotch rocket, and the question is it worth the money? Do I think it's worth the money, number one? Would I buy it again? And of course, I'm going to answer both of those questions in two different ways. Now, is the bike itself worth the money? Well, from a looking at it perspective, you know, just from like a looks perspective, absolutely. If you got to be bougie and you got to have one of the best looking bikes out there, you definitely got to get yourself a 959. Now, it's definitely not the most powerful bike, that's for sure. It definitely sounds unique, as I would say. It definitely sounds broken, but that's just the signature sound of Ducati, that remarkable V-twin that they love to use. Some people say that's Ducati's soul. This is the way a real bike is supposed to sound. Whatever's your preference, that's all you. I don't really care. It's whatever. Sounds broken if you ask me. But that's the way Ducati has their shit sounding. That's the way it's going to be. So we're going to keep it rolling with that. But now, do I think the bike itself is worth, you know, the $18,000? Well, if you take it from a mechanical's perspective, the answer is hell no. Do I think that it's worth it if you don't really care about the mechanical part and you just want to be bougie and have a crotch rocket that's fast and super unique and stuff like that? Well, absolutely yes. Because since I've owned this bike, there hasn't been that many of them on the road that I've seen, excluding my buddy who he has one. But I think since I've had this bike, I've only seen maybe one or two itself on the road, just as an overall. So it's a pretty unique bike. You see a lot more Gigsters. You see a lot more R1s. You don't really see any V4s or stuff like that. But the big four, meaning like the Ninjas, the Gigsters, the CBRs, and of course the R1s. Now, the elite models, the ones with like DDS, you know, the V4S's, the Gigster-R model, the ZX-10RR, you know, all those top models, it's kind of hard to sometimes spot those from further away. But as far as the bike itself, seeing that bike, absolutely, you see those bikes more than you would see the standard edition Ducati 959. And it doesn't matter if it's white or red, the two colors that this bike only comes in. Now, upon riding this bike and stuff like that, as I've mentioned many times in many of my other videos that I've done reviews on it and such like that, the seat is absolutely horrible. It's super uncomfortable, and it's like you're sitting on a sheet of ice. It's super slippery when you have a passenger on the back. It's super uncomfortable for them, but you got to give it to Ducati. The seats look freaking amazing. The bike looks freaking amazing. Now, when it comes to maintenance and stuff like that, well, that's another story too. So you got to give a Ducati a thumbs down here on that, because it seems like a lot of bolts and normal shit that should have been tightened from the factory just ain't so tight on this bike here from the factory. And you kind of have to continuously go over it, kind of like an old Harley, because shit just be vibrating loose and stuff like that. And then you need a lot of special tools and stuff like that to work on this bike that don't traditionally work with your standard crotch rockets. Here we go, like your axle nut here. Now, a way around it that I have said in my previous video that I released a quick little tech tip for you guys, that for the ones that don't know that like to work on their Ducatis, you could use a 12-point socket. Very similar to like if you have to have a 12-point socket when you're putting like ARP head bolts and head studs inside of a racing engine. You could use a 12-point socket and it will work. You do not have to buy the $80,000 Ducati socket that goes over this. For this one, is it a 36 millimeter. As you can see, this is 12-point socket, as these are going to be 12-point over here to take the rear sprocket off. So that's one thing that if you all have 6-point sockets in your toolbox, which most people do, you got to go out and buy a bunch of 12-point shit to go on ahead and get to, wrenching on your Ducati. And then there's a few other, ins and out tools, odd size Torx bits, inverted Torx, tamper-proof Torx, and stuff like that are all on this bike that consistently, you just have to have those tools to obviously wrench and do things on this bike. Oil changes and stuff like that, as I've mentioned, as far as maintenance and stuff like that, it's a little bit more tedious as it is on a conventional bike, such as like a conventional GSXR over here. But again, this bike is great, and there's like almost no maintenance to it besides, the normal chain. There's just the chain, same maintenance is on this one as it is on this one. But there's like almost no maintenance on this bike as there is. You always have to look out for something kind of here on this bike. Whether it be the instrument cluster messing up, or the gear shifter is not working, the quick shifter is malfunctioning, this bike will like almost never malfunction. And I'm not saying that because it's a Suzuki, but I'm just going to say that mostly for the Japanese bikes. But when you take this bike out, whether you're cruising down the street, you go to a car show, you go wherever, this bike is definitely a head turner. And it looks apart from every other motorcycle that's really out there. Until another one shows up next to you, and then you got a twin, you're like, God damn, you wore the same clothes to the party as me. But other than that, it's pretty stout. But riding it on the street absolutely sucks. You're kind of, you're very far raked over. There's a lot of pressure here on your hands for when you're grabbing the handlebars. The handlebar clip-ons themselves, they're obviously much smaller than your traditional bike, so you kind of have to grip them with like a whole round, and people that have bigger hands will actually wrap their entire hands around the entire handlebars as opposed to the bigger ones. It's a little bit more comfortable. The seat is super slippery, so your junk tends to hit the tank a lot and move forward. And then, of course, your passenger, she's going to slide, or he is going to slide back and forth, on the seat behind you, and be sliding back and forth into you as the driver. The foot pegs and everything are perfectly fine. But again, while you're sitting in traffic and stuff, for you and your passenger, there's definitely going to be some heat because the rear cylinder, and there is the exhaust port right there. So they say it obviously helps a lot when you get the titanium Akrapovic Racing exhaust, but I'm not spending $3,500 to reduce the heat of this bike. That's absolutely ridiculous. It should just not create that much damn heat to begin with. But if you want to look bougie, and you want to look nice, and you want to look apart, and you want to have that Ducati, and you want to, be all, got to be nice and be so different, then get you this bike. Then it makes everything worth it, because if you're all about the looks and stuff like that, that's the bike for you. But if you want something that's going to ride and not give you any problems, definitely stay as far as the hell as you way can from this bike, and because it's going to drive you freaking insane. So you be the judge. Would I buy this bike again? For me, as a mechanic, probably not. But I'm glad that I have it. I got to experience with it, and then I'll enjoy it and move on with it and move on to the next one. So the bike is worth the money to you if it suits you to be fit for that at that time. Just don't bitch and complain about the problems and things that it has when it comes with it, because again, they're kind of like a super hot girlfriend, super high maintenance, always needing something and nagging in you in the ear all the time. But she looks damn good, so it's just how much shit you're ready to put up with. So that's going to wrap it up here for today's video. If you guys like what you saw, Facebook, Instagram, @SpeedBug, same name here as YouTube. And me and the Ducati will see y'all here for another episode here on the SpeedBug channel. Deuces, y'all.